The ultimate destiny of Asia would not be decided in the courts, but in the dust of Gaugamela. Darius III had assembled a terrifying host, flattening the ground to maximize the lethality of his scythed chariots. Alexander's generals pleaded for a stealthy night attack to bypass the sheer, overwhelming numbers of the Persian force, but the young king fiercely refused, declaring that he would never steal a victory like a thief in the night. As the morning sun broke through the haze, the stage was set for the greatest clash of the ancient world. Alexander noticed a critical flaw in the shifting movements of the massive Persian left flank. With brilliant tactical intuition, he began marching his elite companion cavalry diagonally across the battlefield. Darius took the bait, ordering his troops to follow, which inadvertently created a fatal gap in the center of his own line. Seizing the exact moment, Alexander wheeled his horse around and charged directly into the opening with unmatched fury. The Macedonian phalanx followed closely behind, their long spears cutting through the chaotic dust like a silver wall. The raw violence of the Macedonian wedge pierced straight toward the royal chariot of Darius himself. Alexander fought like a man possessed, clearing a bloody path through the elite royal bodyguards of the Persian Empire. As his defenders fell around him, panic gripped the great king, who realized his lines were completely broken. Darius turned his chariot around and fled the battlefield, leaving his vast army leaderless and completely exposed. The Persian Empire, which had ruled the known world for centuries, shattered into pieces in a single afternoon. Instead of burning the defeated cities, Alexander marched into Babylon not as a destructive conqueror, but as a liberator. The citizens marveled as the young king paid deep respect to their ancient gods and local religious traditions. He walked through the legendary Hanging Gardens, amazed by the sheer luxury and architectural brilliance of the East. Yet, the endless wealth and absolute power began to subtly alter the mind of the young Macedonian king. The humble prince of Pella was slowly fading away, replaced by the grand ambitions of a divine emperor. The march continued to Persepolis, the spiritual heart and ceremonial capital of the proud Persian civilization. During a wild, drunken victory banquet, a dark turning point in the campaign was suddenly reached. A Greek courtesan incited the intoxicated crowd to burn the palace as revenge for the historical destruction of Athens. Alexander threw the first torch, and within minutes, centuries of art, history, and wealth went up in roaring flames. As the embers floated into the night sky, many realized the old world was gone, buried under a sea of ash. With no empires left to conquer in the West, Alexander looked toward the mysterious lands of the Far East, but his growing adoption of Persian customs and court rituals deeply angered his veteran Macedonian soldiers. Conspiracies and whispers began to echo through the royal tents, feeding the king's growing paranoia. Philotas, a trusted commander, was executed for treason, followed by his father, the legendary general Parmenion. The bond of brotherhood that had built the army was fracturing under the heavy weight of absolute rule. During a heated, alcohol-fueled argument in Samarkand, his old friend Clitus openly criticized Alexander's arrogance. Clitus shouted that the king owed all his glorious victories to the blood of his loyal Macedonian veterans. Blinded by sudden rage and wine, Alexander snatched a guard spear and thrust it directly into his friend's chest. As Clitus drew his final breath, the fog of anger cleared, leaving the king frozen in absolute horror. For 3 days, Alexander locked himself in his tent, weeping bitterly for the brother who had once saved his life. Hoping to find the fabled outer ocean at the edge of the world, Alexander pushed his army into India. The clear, dry skies of the Mediterranean were replaced by the relentless, suffocating rains of the monsoon season. The soldiers marched through thick mud, their clothes rotting off their backs and their weapons rusting in the damp air. Poisonous snakes and unfamiliar tropical diseases spread through the ranks, dampening the spirits of the army. Yet, driven by an unyielding obsession with eternal glory, Alexander refused to halt his eastward march. At the Hydaspes River, King Porus stood waiting with a massive army featuring hundreds of towering war elephants. The Macedonian horses panicked at the sight and smell of the giant beasts, making a direct charge impossible. In the dead of night, during a fierce thunderstorm, Alexander secretly crossed the raging river to surprise the enemy. The battle was a brutal, bloody slaughterhouse as the phalanx fought desperately against the trampling elephants. Though Alexander claimed victory, the horrific cost of the battle deeply shook the confidence of his men. At the Hyphasis River, the rumor of even larger Indian empires with thousands of elephants broke the army's resolve. For 8 long years, these men had marched over 17,000 miles, bleeding for their king's ambition. They gathered in the rain, weeping and begging their commander to finally let them return home to see their families. Alexander retreated to his tent in a bitter fury, threatening to push forward alone into the unknown. But the heavy silence of his loyal veterans convinced him that even a god-king cannot command broken spirits. Forced to turn back, Alexander chose a brutal, unforgiving route through the harsh Gedrosian desert. The blazing heat and complete lack of water proved far more lethal than any enemy army they had faced. Thousands of women, children, and soldiers who followed the baggage train perished in the burning sands. Alexander marched on foot alongside his men, famously pouring a helmet of water onto the sand to share their suffering. By the time the shattered army returned to Babylon, the invincible mystique of the empire was gone forever. In June of 323 BC, inside the ancient palace of Nebuchadnezzar, a sudden, mysterious fever struck the young king down. As he lay dying at the age of 32, his worried generals gathered around his bed, weeping for their leader. They asked the fading conqueror to whom he would leave his massive, hard-won empire. With his very last breath, Alexander whispered his final, fateful words, to the strongest. His eyes closed, leaving behind a fragmented world and a legendary name that would echo through eternity.